Welcome to Holy Health, the podcast where cutting-edge health insights meet timeless biblical wisdom. Join us as we explore the latest in wellness, fitness, and mental health, all while grounding our journey in the spiritual truths and guidance found in the Torah. Whether you're looking to nourish your body, mind, or soul, we'll help you live a life of balance, vitality, and faith. Tune in to discover how to achieve holistic health through the perfect blend of modern science and ancient wisdom. Let's dive into the fullness of life, body, and spirit together. Guys, welcome back to Holy Health. I was really excited to bring this episode out last week, but for a variety of reasons that didn't really happen. And I have to tell you that today's episode will be a little bit different. And that difference is that you guys know I typically tend to interview a person about some type of something to do with health. And then following that, I tend to bring on a completely separate person who then puts what that person spoke about into the context of where we can find it in Torah. And this episode may be hard for some of you to hear. Pretty much most people you know are probably taking a statin, or many people you know are probably taking a statin. And when my Torah expert listened to the episode in order to be able to talk about it and put it into Torah, it was a very difficult episode for her because she does take statins, and she just felt like it wasn't something she could do. And I completely respect that. So you may hear things in this episode that don't align with what you believe. It may bring up questions that you didn't even know you had, and it may make you want to do further research and reach out to your own doctor or healthcare practitioner. And I encourage you to do that. These episodes are about giving you guys some knowledge or leading you somewhere that you can then take over and find out more and more and more about that subject if it's something that interests you. But if you don't even know what's out there, then you're not even going to know what to look for. And most people often take medications just because they're handed them and because someone says they need them without giving too much thought to why. And the whole point of this episode, as is many episodes, is that often something like high cholesterol can be a symptom. It may not actually be the root of the problem. So you need somebody who's going to help you take a look at the bigger picture so that you are not just band-aiding over a symptom and then possibly causing other problems. So really the goal of this is just to get you guys thinking. So I'm really excited. I actually recorded this, I think, about 3 or 4 months ago with Dr. Jim Chialtis. And I realized that I wanted to do this episode. And so like I've done on many other episodes, I've told you guys, now sometimes I go to ChatGPT and I ask the chat, who would be a good person to interview. But I believe when it came to this episode, I actually went into Spotify looking for somebody who could talk about what the problem was with statin drugs and using that as your method of controlling cholesterol. And Dr. Chialtis came up, and he is an expert. And, one of the things I love, guys, I'm going to read you his bio right now. So as always, I apologize. I'm sure there is a way for me to be reading off some prompting thing so it looks like I'm staring directly at the camera for those of you watching on YouTube, but I'm going to be reading off my phone. But what I love is when I opened up his website, the first thing it says at the top is Dr. Jim, bridging ancient wisdom and modern science. And that is exactly what we do here at Holy Health. So I love that this is the first thing I see when I open up his website, just to read you guys a little bit about who Dr. Jim is. So Dr. Jim started his practice because he saw too many patients falling through the cracks of the standard medical system. They had normal labs, but debilitating symptoms, or they had chronic pain that medication was only masking and not fixing. So he realized that to truly help people heal, he needed more than just one viewpoint. And that is why he practices a unique blend of functional medicine to identify the biochemical root causes and traditional Chinese medicine to restore the body's energetic balance. His goal is not just to manage your disease, it's to help you rediscover what it feels like to truly be healthy. And I love that. So of course, I will be giving you guys links to the website, to Instagram, and all of that in the show notes as well. And we're starting, this is the last episode of, 2025. We're going into the new year. I've got several interviews set up for the beginning of January on some really interesting topics. But as you guys know, I am always looking for both new people to interview, and I am really looking for new people to come on and help me with these Torah extras. So I'm just telling you guys, and I'll probably say it again in the Torah extra, everybody has their own unique way of doing this. And my way, the way that I'm going to bring some of these topics that Dr. Jim and I talk about into Torah are very different than the way somebody else might do it. But it's just to give you guys a taste and to show you that everything that we practice today can be found in some way in Torah. And, the world likes to talk about biohacking. Like, biohacking is such a big thing now. Honestly, if you look at what biohacking is, and we've covered many, many of these topics on the show, biohacking is really living our life according to the Torah and the way God intended, because it's honestly going back to basics. So I want to wish you guys a Shabbat Shalom and a happy secular New Year. And please continue to reach out to me. You could tell me you love it. You could tell me you hate it. I'm good with all of it. I just love hearing from you guys. And please continue to share Holy Health with anyone that you think can benefit. Follow us across all the platforms. And if you're listening on YouTube or wherever you're listening, please give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down even if you want. Write a comment, love it or hate it. But all of that helps the algorithm. And the algorithm has been picking up on this show every week. Baruch Hashem, thank God we have been getting more and more listeners. Even though at this point, I try to put the show out every other week for now. So that's it for now. And please let me know what you think of this episode. Shabbat Shalom. Guys, I'm so excited to be welcoming Dr. Chialtis here today. We are going to be discussing a topic. So many different people have approached me. I've got one or two friends, a patient who have loved ones or spouses or people they care about that are taking statin drugs, and they themselves understood that there might be something not so healthy about actually taking these drugs that are just so often prescribed. So I decided I wanted to find an expert who could come on and talk to us and give us the truth about what are maybe the benefits, what are the drawbacks to some of these different statin drugs. So I'd like to welcome you today, Dr. Chialtis. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. So could we start out just by something simple? Could you tell us what statin drugs are?
Yeah, statin drugs are a class of pharmaceutical drug that basically inhibit an enzyme in the liver that eventually leads to this long cascade of cholesterol production. So, when we draw our blood and we get this number, this like LDL number or what have you, the vast majority of that actually came from your liver, not from what you ate. Something along the lines of like 20%, maybe 30% of what's in your blood came from what you've been eating. The rest of it's what the liver does. And so this class of drug shuts down an enzyme that kind of stops that whole cascade of events from happening quite so effectively. So you end up with lower cholesterol in the blood. It's called an HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor, if we want to sound nerdy.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
So if I'm shutting that down, what's that actually going to do to my body? And is it good to always be shutting that down? Or would it maybe be smarter to understand why your body is increasing that cholesterol?
Well, yes, I think it's always great. I mean, and you are speaking to a functional medicine practitioner here. So yes, so the answer to that question is always yes. What's the root? Life is really all about, measuring risk to benefits, I think. And, this particular class of drug, when taken chronically, can have some negative side effects. So one of the most commonly discussed would be along that whole cascade of events that it's kind of shutting down, there's a little shunt that comes off the side for a little compound called CoQ10. And CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, it's essential for every cell, definitely muscle tissue, and definitely and especially heart tissue, in order for these cells to function correctly. So if you're stopping that enzymatic reaction kind of early along the chain, you end up becoming deficient in certain things such as CoQ10. That can have dramatic impacts. I mean, one of the most common side effects of usually higher dose but chronic statin use is like deep muscle aches and pains, things like just joint pain. And that can be annoying subtly, or it can be really nasty. In some very rare cases, you can have breakdown of muscle tissue, but hey, it happens. So I always kind of think, well, if this compound, the CoQ10 compound, is responsible for helping my heart beat correctly, why would I want to do something chronically that sort of makes that a little bit more difficult? That's number one. I've got one more if you
Yeah,
don't.
please, if you could go on and
Sure.
tell us what are the other negative impacts of taking a statin?
Okay, so any prescribing physician that is giving out these drugs, typically, I think it's kind of standard of care to test liver enzymes before and during the treatment, because it's known to raise liver enzymes. So what does that mean? Liver enzymes like ALT and AST, they're found in liver cells, also elsewhere in the body too, but we call them liver enzymes in quotes because they're in large part found there. If a liver cell dies, all right, which they do, all cells die and they regenerate, most of them. They break open, they spill their contents into the blood, and then we draw the blood and we say, oh boy, look at that. Look at the number of enzymes, right? So these quote unquote liver enzymes, also called transaminase enzymes, basically tell us like how much stress to the liver is going on at any given moment, how many cells are dying. And it generally goes up with statin use. So what's the consequences of killing liver cells at an increased rate? I mean, that's an open-ended question I can't officially answer, because the liver has too many functions in our body to even discuss. I mean, it's probably my favorite organ.
Right. I have a friend who is a doctor, and his doctor told him that his cholesterol was high, and he's someone who exercises,
Hmm.
eats pretty healthy, lives a pretty healthy lifestyle, and the only thing he had was his cholesterol was high. So his doctor told him that he should take a statin.
Yes.
So he started taking a statin, and then maybe a month later, I don't even know if it was that long, he went and had blood tests, and all of a sudden he had elevated blood sugar as well.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was something that I know I'd heard years ago, that were one of the downfalls or one of the problems with statins, is that you'll trade your high cholesterol for high sugar.
Okay. I love this. This is wonderful because it's opening up the pathways of discussion here. so
Right.
so yes, the liver does a million and one things, right? One of the primary things it does is help us balance our blood sugar. It can store, it can release, it can do things. So if we're stressing it in any way, and every pill we put in, I don't care if it's statin or anything else, it's a burden. We have to detoxify things. Um, it could be that you're hypoglycemic in that person, or it could be that you're hyper when you high blood sugar. Pardon me. Um, so all bets are kind of off. It doesn't surprise me that's happening. Um, Now, if that is what's happening,
Hmm.
we need to back up a little bit and discuss about what cholesterol actually is. But if that's what's happening and the liver is not managing blood sugar correctly, and let's say there's now high blood sugar, which comes with high insulin,
Hmm.
right? That's your insulin resistance population. That's your type 2 diabetics eventually. What generally happens with the cholesterol is that it gets smaller in particle size, and usually more of them. So maybe this is a good time to discuss what cholesterol actually means, because
Please.
really what you're talking about so far, what this patient was told by their doctor, is probably their LDL cholesterol was elevated. I've done podcasts on my own and I've written articles. The cholesterol misconception is this: HDL, good cholesterol; LDL, bad cholesterol. First of all, it's nonsense. Like without LDL, you'd be dead real fast. So it's not bad. It just has its issues. But the biggest misconception is that they are cholesterol. LDL is not cholesterol. We need to keep that in mind. LDL, low density lipoprotein. It's literally just a fatty protein bubble that carries cholesterol. Cholesterol is just cholesterol, just found in the particles. So HDL is a different particle from LDL. Think of it like an eggshell carrying an egg inside, right? But LDL is considered bad because it kind of goes from the liver, where it's all packaged, and it's delivered to our tissues, where it's desperately needed, right? But in doing so, it can get stuck, right? It can form plaques. HDL we call it good because it sort of does the opposite. It kind of brings things back. So you kind of want to have, in theory, a lower LDL and a higher HDL.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Having said that,
Mm-hmm.
it's not what's inside the LDL particle that tends to kill you. Okay? And that's what we're all worried about here. Heart attacks, strokes, all that kind of stuff. It's not what's inside that gets us, at least primarily. It's the shell. It's the LDL particle, right?
Okay.
How big is it, and how many do you have? So I like to give the picture, the image of a sidewalk, of a freshly paved sidewalk, no cracks, right? I like to think of that as like our little babies. They don't have heart disease yet. Okay, they're perfect. You can roll LDL balls across that artery sidewalk all day long, and nothing's probably going to stick. Right? It doesn't matter if what's inside the LDL is stuffed full or if it's empty. If you start getting cracked sidewalks now, if your arteries are getting kind of old and inflamed and all for millions of reasons that happens, then yeah, the LDL balls can now start to stick. All right.
Okay.
But basketballs, not as much as marbles. Right? So what they do on that basic lipid panel is they take the LDLs and the HDLs aside, they categorize them, and then they crack them open like eggs, so to speak, and they dump out the cholesterol inside, and then on your theoretical table now, you have this pile. And we're going to call that elevated at 150, because ideally you don't want it above 100 in the mainstream sense. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So elevated, oh dear. All right? We need statin drugs. But you and I both have that same number, except for you have 2 basketballs and I've got 3 dozen marbles. Okay, so your 2 basketballs are going to roll right over most cracks. My 3 dozen marbles are going to click, 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 and I'm going to form plaque tomorrow. All right, so we need to know that extra level.
That's
Yeah.
what I wanted to ask. How do
Yeah.
you know if you have basketballs or you have marbles?
Yeah, so I don't know about how it works in other parts of the world, but I'm pretty sure it's a basic test that can be done. It's called an NMR panel, and it stands for nuclear magnetic resonance. It doesn't make sense to most people how that relates to cholesterol, but what that does is they filter out the different sizes of molecules, basically.
Okay.
And so they will tell you, yep, you have way too many small dense, and they'll call that, in quotes, pattern B.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want pattern B particles. That's been shown to have a much higher risk of cardiac incident and death.
Mm-hmm.
The rub here is that you can still have all the plaque even if your basic LDL number is low.
Right. Okay.
Because it's just an empty particle, but the particle can get stuck anyways.
Okay.
Now, if you also have a stuffed full particle, okay, and you're plaquing,
Mm-hmm.
all right, then the basic numbers actually start to make a difference. And I will say, as a natural medicine doctor,
Mm-hmm.
there are some times where statins might be okay, right? It's risk to benefit here. It's just like, when do I use these massive tools?
Okay, so if
Yeah.
I understood you correctly,
Yeah.
if somebody comes out with a test that has an elevated LDL, you would want them to possibly do a further test checking for NMR, checking for the
Yeah.
nuclear, I forgot what you said it's
Magnetic resonance. Yeah. Mhm.
nuclear magnetic resonancy, so you could see the size of your particles. Because I remember hearing about particle size. I interviewed a cardiothoracic surgeon a while ago who also talked about particle sizes. I don't think he was referring to cholesterol. I don't remember now. But that also that particle sizes of different things. It was the particle size that mattered. It wasn't so much the amount. He could very well have been speaking about cholesterol. I need to
Yeah.
go back and give that
He
another
probably
listen.
was. Yeah.
So you're saying that anybody who's coming out before you rush to possibly take a statin drug, I mean, we could talk about lifestyle in just a minute, but before you rush to go on that statin drug, it might behoove you to actually go for further testing to see, are you actually at risk? Because if your particle size is not these small marble sizes, but rather the big sizes, just that elevated cholesterol is not necessarily giving you an increased risk factor.
You got it. That's it. And that's still just scratching the surface, but yeah, you got it.
Okay, so now somebody goes and they do have elevated LDL and they do have the smaller particle size. Would you first want to put them on a statin, or would you first want them to maybe change some things in their lifestyle?
Oh yeah, absolutely change their lifestyle because you can get these particle sizes to shift in a matter of weeks. It's highly insulin dependent. Like this is why we got on this thread. If you're taking
Right.
something that's potentially poisoning your liver, we'll blame the statins for now. But hey, it could be somebody who's not sleeping well, so they drink a bunch of NyQuil or some of those types of things that have acetaminophen in them that are known to be toxic to liver. I mean, and they enjoy a cocktail, and they and they eat fast food all the time. Then yeah, like they're pushing this high insulin lifestyle. And then insulin triggers the liver to start packaging the cholesterol differently. So yeah, I've got
Okay.
to start with diet and lifestyle.
Okay, so first of all, you were talking about a theme that we have heard countless times from pretty much everyone who's ever come on this podcast when we're
Yeah.
talking about legitimate physical health. We, talk about inflammation and what does inflammation do to the body and how that makes people insulin resistant. So from your point of view, let's break down what would you consider to be lifestyle factor that you would want people to change?
Um, Boy, diet and exercise are real tight, but I would almost say first move the body. If you're moving your body and you're getting in exercise to the whatever tolerance level that is for that individual. You might be an 80-year-old person with bad knees and an emphysema. Well, maybe just going to the pool and kicking your legs in the water will do for now, right? Or there's others that go trail running for 26 miles. So I would just say getting the body moving first because that activates all of the intracellular mechanisms. It helps us build mitochondria, which give us more ATP and energy to perform our functions. Gets the blood flowing. So that also kind of gives us, I don't like to say it too loud, but it gives us a little bit more tolerance with our diet
Okay.
if we're really moving our body. But the diet specifically, and that can look like a lot of things, and there's a lot of opinions on diet, but I generally like, and the patients that I see that do the best eat sort of like a paleo-like diet. They don't have to be 100% paleo fanatical, or autoimmune paleo. That's really radical. But reducing sugar, of course, reducing the simple carbohydrates, it just helps balance the insulin levels. So bringing it back to more of an animal food, animal protein and plant-based diet, vegetable-based, some fruit. I see, at least from a blood sugar and inflammation perspective, I see the biggest hit there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and you're going right along the lines of things that we've heard from a lot of different people. So if we go back to cholesterol for a minute, aren't there good things that cholesterol do? So in other words, if the regular world is saying that your LDL shouldn't be over 100, is that your opinion as a functional medicine doctor? Because aren't there things that actually the body requires cholesterol for? So maybe sometimes having
Yeah.
cholesterol that's a little bit higher might actually be okay.
Absolutely, in my opinion. And this also speaks to the very notion of what a functional blood chemistry range is. So over time, we've kind of gotten sicker as a population. And so for most markers, that bell curve that we all kind of like compare ourselves against has gotten bigger and bigger, right? So you can have more disharmony with more, with the doctor saying you're normal. Now, statin drugs have been prescribed so much that it's messed up our averages. And so that's one of the few that the bell curve is tighter now. So it's smaller. So that 100, the high end of the LDL reference range is 99 with most labs I see. It's artificial. It's you're being compared against somebody who's highly medicated. So that's not really fair for optimal physiology. So I don't know, if you go back 50 years or something like that, the average was probably in like the 120s or 130s. I don't know. I'm 50, so I'm a little too young to remember, but it's something like that. Um, what can I say about that? But yes, so if you do happen to have like a LDL of 120 and the doctor's like, oh no, and then they want to put you on a drug, it's like, well, first of all, check your other things. Make sure there's other labs we can discuss later that maybe it would be good to rule out some risk, but um, we don't want to interfere with what cholesterol does. That's the bottom line. If you get it too low, if that becomes the focus, then you are starving it from places like your brain, which is like something like 70% cholesterol, all your nerve tissue. It's not uncommon for people that have had a heart attack that are on aggressive statin therapy to start becoming depressed. Yeah. Because their brain is taking a hit. Not to mention all of the sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, they're all steroid based. So other things can go down, like libido and sexual function, which is no picnic for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean it's essential in every single cell membrane.
Okay,
We
so
need
you did.
cholesterol.
You're right. You did say that, and occasionally you would say that it's okay for someone to use a statin. What might that be? What might that person look like where you'd maybe, and would you want to keep them on it, or would the goal to be to get them off of it as soon as possible?
Sure. So there's some genetic traits. So there's another lab that I like to kind of run when I see kind of surprisingly high numbers. Like I saw the other day a person with a total cholesterol of 300 and an LDL cholesterol of like 190 something. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean that to me goes like alarm bells are going off. Like okay, this is probably more than it should be, right?
Okay.
What that's optimal. So let's run something called a lipid electrophoresis. It's also called a lipid phenotype test, and
Hmm.
it looks for these. There's like I think 7 different genetic categories. So if you have, for example, like a lipid phenotype 2A or a 2B, 2B being worse, that's a person who genetically lacks receptors on their liver cells for LDL.
Okay.
So those LDL particles can't effectively dock to the liver and dump their cargo to be
Hmm.
processed and eliminated and what have you. So, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's important to kind of do this.
Okay.
There's newer and better ways than statin drugs that are still prescription based,
Such as, I'd love to hear about
such
them.
as the PCSK9 inhibiting drugs, which
Okay.
PCSK9, I believe. Yeah, it's outside my scope to prescribe them,
Right.
but it's an injection, and it's either weekly or no, I think it's monthly or once every 6 months, which kind of freaks me out. I don't like the 6 month concept, but it basically inhibits a protein it's kind of a reverse negative, if I understand it correctly. The protein inhibits the production of new receptors. So if you're inhibiting the inhibition, then you have new receptors. So it helps you. It doesn't stop a whole cascade of events, like a statin drug. It
Okay.
kind of allows the liver to kind of create more of these receptors, so you can dump the cholesterol more effectively. But as it stands,
Hmm.
it's still sort of like good luck getting the doctor to do it in a lot of ways. I don't know. Again,
Is it
doctors in other
because,
parts of the world.
well, that's what I was going to say. Is it because the doctors are making so much money on the statin drugs? Is
I
it
don't
because, I
know.
don't want to say that every doctor's only out for money. I don't want to say that.
No, it's a
Or is it
system.
because it's the easy way out? It's what everybody does.
Yeah, the other ones are kind of new as well, and they're highly expensive. So I think that it's the insurance companies that are dictating it more. That's my thought on it. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. Um, but somebody like that, like an aggressive, lipid phenotype 2B especially, that those people are in trouble. Like they're probably going to have a heart attack at an earlier age. Like they're a big risk. So you do everything you can, and then yeah, you beef up on CoQ10 supplementation, and you do what it takes to kind of mitigate the toxic effects of the drug. Right? I'm not above that in certain cases, but you can still do other stuff. I mean, there's natural statin like herbs. The herb, the red yeast rice extract, where the very first statin drug was synthesized from. It's just a yeast that grows on rice. It's usually better tolerated than a statin drug. I don't tend to use it honestly all that much, just because it still cuts the whole thing down. It works like a statin.
Okay.
And from what I understand, it can be really hard to regulate the amount of the active ingredient in the statin, or pardon me, in the red yeast rice. So
Okay.
some formulas get too much, and it's actually considered pharmaceutical, and
Wow.
it's flying under the radar of the powers that be. And in other cases, it has nearly nothing, and you're just wasting your money. So that was kind of sad for me to learn because it's nice to be able to prescribe herbs, when
Right.
necessary.
Right.
But that is an option, and there are good quality ones that I have seen personally make changes on labs.
Okay, so someone comes into you, a regular person, a woman, I'm 56 years old, right? Like a 56-year-old woman, reasonably active, just with high cholesterol being the only symptom. What do you do? Like, what are you going to look at first? If that person's been told, like, as usually they are, well, your
Mhm.
LDL's high, you need to go on a statin.
I would encourage her to just like look at these other risk factors.
Mhm.
So I kind of alluded to them earlier, but that NMR panel is a great one to start with. Oxidized LDL.
Okay.
Ox LDL is the name of the test, and that one is way more predictive than LDL number alone.
Mhm.
So if you have high LDL cholesterol and a good chunk of it is oxidized,
Mhm.
then that's highly predictive, right? And then we
Okay.
talk about how do you reduce oxidation in the body and that kind of thing. Long story short, lots of antioxidants.
Okay.
So that gets us back into analyzing diet and lifestyle and all that business and potentially supplements. Um, what else? There are other genetic factors like ApoB, you know, that those can be in fact impacted by things like exercise and as well. But you know, these are just all things you have to manage. If you have high ApoB, it's like, okay, maybe I want to jump on more fish oils. Maybe
Right.
the
And it,
conversation just has to develop, right?
it definitely sounds to me that like you are saying, number one, it's individual. So
Yes,
every 56-year-old woman is obviously not going to be the same. You have to analyze each person's lifestyle, other factors in their blood. So, number one, there's nothing we can really say that's going to be across the board for everyone because everyone is different. So, you kind
that's
of have
right.
to look at each person individually. But that, in
Yeah,
your opinion, jumping on a statin right away just because your cholesterol is high would be a mistake, that there are other things that should be looked at.
absolutely. And a long time ago, I wrote some blog post called "Treating the Lab Report and Not the Person." And I think that's in essence what happens if you're a 56-year-old woman and you get your cholesterol down and your LDL's like 85 and like rainbows are popping out, well, okay. But what else, the functional medicine doctor in me wants to like really scrutinize the liver, really scrutinize the blood sugar, really scrutinize the thyroid. Because I can tell you, the thyroid is another one that where the reference ranges have gone banana pants over the decades. Like they really have gotten odd, and they allow for so much disharmony. So you go to your doctor, and all they see is this cholesterol thing popping out because it's one of the few that actually the reference ranges got tighter, and then everything else looks great. Well, I'd want to filter your panel through a functional blood chemistry lens. And if we're seeing some really subtle hypothyroidism, for example, very common in like menopause, especially or perimenopausal women, very common to see that click on, then that could be the mechanism for the cholesterol because the liver is just doing what it's told. And the thyroid provides the gas pedal for every cell. So, yeah.
Okay, so that is actually very important information, what you just
Oh,
said,
yeah.
especially because I would say the bulk of this audience is perimenopausal, menopausal women,
Mm.
the bulk of this listening audience. And so to me, you just said something very important that just because your cholesterol is high, this goes back to exactly like you said, the functional medicine doctor in you want to understand why. So just running to take a statin drug because there can be so many side effects without understanding why. Because if the root of it is a thyroid problem and you treat the thyroid problem, the cholesterol problem should then get better. So, what you're doing by just taking the statin drugs or putting on a band aid and another hole is just going to crop up somewhere else because
Hmm.
if the thyroid is dysfunctional, eventually the whole system is not going to function very
Yeah.
well.
Right, and this is also a time in everybody's life, but specifically women who have gone through menopause and the brains are not getting exposed to the same sex hormones as before, right?
Yeah.
Um, Oftentimes you see an accelerated neurological decline, right? And so all of that drives, itself. If the thyroid is in the background also understimulating the brain cells, then
Right.
yeah, then you end up with decline. So yeah, I think that it's taking a statin drug can be helpful in very few instances, but it upsets me because it's putting blinders on to the beauty and the complexity that is cardiovascular disease. I really love the topic. I feel bad for the people experiencing it, but um, are we talking about a cholesterol model? Are we talking about an endocrine model, like the sex hormones being out of balance? That'll do it. Are we talking about a thyroid model? Are we talking about an inflammatory model? Are we talking about an infection model? Right? You
Right.
can have various viral infections or even bacterial infections that populate the lining of your arteries and inflame them, and quite frankly, put cracks in your sidewalk. Right? So now normal cholesterol is starting to stick. Right? So
Well,
let's I suppose, I hate to be snarky, but let's pat them on the head and say thank you for your recommendation. Let's put a pin in that,
yeah.
and
Thank
let's
you.
talk about the other stuff. And if they're not willing to talk about the other stuff, then you walk out. I mean, I don't, it's not your right doctor. I
The
love being
thing,
challenged. You challenge me as a doctor, and if I can't answer it or tell you, you know what, I'm going to get back to you in a week, then you just fire me, you know, because I'm
no,
not
I
your
agree
partner.
with you.
Yeah,
It's all pieces of a puzzle and it's figuring out that puzzle. It's doing the detective work that I think even like I call myself a functional physical therapist. So it's doing that detective work to find out what the root of the problem is. And I feel like this should be the biggest takeaway for people from our conversation. It's not that you're saying that a statin will in every case is 100% bad, but it sounds like in every case before somebody runs to just take a statin drug, it would behoove them to understand what it was that caused their cholesterol to be high in the first place.
that's right.
Because I'm just throwing out a number, but let's just say in 9 cases out of 10, the statin is plugging a hole, but it's not actually solving the problem. It's putting a band-aid on top of the problem, and that band-aid can actually cascade into other problems because you're
Mm,
not treating the root of the problem.
that's
So I
right.
just want to make sure that I'm sort of summing it up so hopefully it will be clear to people and that you agree with what I just said.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with it. And to add to that, it gets worse.
Oh,
um,
please tell me.
if you're taking a statin drug based on all the things we just discussed, what else are you taking? You're probably taking some kind of a beta blocker, high blood pressure medication, right? You're probably taking blood sugar medications. You might be taking pain medications because being inflamed and insulin resistant, it hurts.
Right.
Um, who knows? You could be taking medication for your fatty liver condition. Uh, I mean, now we're talking polypharmacy, which is, according to the CDC over here, is one of the leading causes of death for people over 65. Is the overuse of prescription medication.
I know that my aunt unfortunately has been hospitalized a bunch over the past, couple months. And like I said, my father is a doctor, and he looked at all of the different drugs that she was taking for many of these conditions that you're talking about. And when he put them into some type of app, there were like 38 interactions between the
Mm.
drugs. So
Oh
that,
gosh.
you're taking one to do something, but something else that you're taking together with that drug are causing all of these other problems. And I think that that's a really big problem today. And people are just so quick because it's the easy way out. It is so much easier to pop a pill than to
Yeah.
have to change your lifestyle. It is so much easier.
Yeah.
And so I understand why at a certain age or maybe at a certain point, there are people who just sort of give up because it's easier to take those pills. And, my point with everything, again, is not, I'm not telling anybody don't take a statin medication, but I'm telling them if you want to take a statin medication, at least understand what you're getting when you take that medication so that you can come from a place of knowledge and maybe a little bit more understanding and maybe think twice or think, is this how you want to treat this? If, like you and I discussed, there could be so many other things going on in the background.
Absolutely. I'm a child of the '80s, and I don't know if you remember GI Joe, but their tagline was "Knowing is half the battle," and
Oh, so I don't remember.
it's always stuck with me. um,
Yeah, I
yeah, it
moved
is.
to Israel in 1984, so I probably
Okay,
missed those commercials, but
that's
and
right.
I'm a little bit older than you, but yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I just feel like that is my goal here with this is not to tell people don't take that statin, but to tell people if you're going to take that statin, please understand both what it's doing to you and what it might be covering up.
Yeah,
And
that's
when
the
you
thing. Don't get
end
a
up
sense
with
of security, right? False security based on this pretty number that was created. Yeah,
Well, I think that this is, such so important. Like, I think that I hope will be a takeaway for most people is that if you are on a statin drug, and I imagine that many people listening probably are taking them because so many people are, that you may want to get to someone like Dr. Chialtis to help you figure out what it is that maybe your body is reflecting in the cholesterol, that maybe something else deeper is going on. And, there are many people, many functional medicine doctors and places to turn. And that ultimately, if you need it, maybe you do need it, but that there could be an option that might be easier on your body and better for you in the long run. And changing your lifestyle will hopefully be a part of that.
absolutely. And you and I have a very similar philosophy, and that is in support of informed consent. We are providing kind of like the the informed consent from the periphery because it's not often happening in the doctor's office. So
It's
thank you
true.
for doing what you do and reaching your population, out there. And I'll do the same because
Yes,
the
thank
more
you.
we
And this
have, the
was,
better decisions
and
we can make. Yeah.
And I don't think I said told everyone how I found you, but I actually had a friend who came to me and said my husband is taking statin and I'm so upset about it. And I popped into my head, I need to do an episode where people get the truth about what goes on with statin drugs. So I went to Spotify, like I like to do, and I typed in what are the problems with statins or are statins on. I don't remember what I typed in, but I came up with an episode that you had done. And I will, of course, link your podcast because you've talked
Thank you.
about so many, many interesting topics in this episode as well. And I just want people to get this better understanding. Our tagline here on Holy Health is God decides when you go, but you decide how you get there. We can do everything. You can have people that do everything seemingly right. And if it's their time to go, it's their time to go. But there are so many things that we can do. And having exactly what you said, that informed consent, because for so many things that have gone on today, people are just handed a pill and nobody is ever telling them the risks and the benefits. Because let's be honest, who reads that teeny tiny, like, okay, I'm 56 and I don't like to admit that I kind of need glasses to read. Who reads that teeny tiny little packet? Nobody's reading that, right? They put the problems that may be there or the risks that may be, but almost nobody is reading them. So I think that this is just an important lesson for people to understand. You want to understand what you're doing so that you know that this is the best thing for you. And it is okay for you to think differently than your doctor sometimes or want a better explanation. And a good doctor may say, you know what, I don't know, but that's really interesting. Let me find out a little bit more about that. So, I really appreciate your coming on to tell us all of this today. And I'd
Absolutely.
like I'd like to ask you, as I like to ask everyone, what does spirituality mean to you?
It's a wonderful question that most people should be asked. All people should be asked. I think simple for me. I see God and I see spirituality in everything and everyone. So to me, that means connecting. You connected with me from across the globe, and for that I'm just grateful. Because that's what we need in this time, especially. So for me, connecting with my fellow humans and really seeing their spirit shine and doing my best to help that spirit shine um, is spirituality for me. I will also say sitting under a redwood tree does the same thing. People are lovely, but so are the mountains, and so are our furry little animals. And there's a mantra that I always repeat to myself, and that's connection is the meaning of life.
Oh, that's powerful. And I agree with you. And there are so many different ways for people to connect, exactly like you said, whether it's with nature, whether it's with each other, whether it's with God. And that's my belief, is that everybody has a spiritual piece in them, and everyone connects differently. But I agree with you that having that connection is so, so, so important. So I really like that. Thank you so much. And what's the best place for people to find you?
Well, my podcast is a great place to kind of hear my voice and hear the scope of what I talk about. My podcast is very much functional medicine based, but it does really ponder this notion of what is wellness anyways. It's kind of a rhetorical question. And so sometimes it's poetry that I decided to write or read. Sometimes it's acupuncture or just sharing life experience. So that's a good one, a functional approach with Dr. Jim Chialtis. And my website is Functional Medicine San Diego. I'm in San Diego, California. So those two places would probably be the best way. I have a bit of an allergy to social media, so I'm not super on it, but but the website's a great place.
You know what? That's okay, because the end of the day, when people are really good at what they do, the social media, sometimes I think some of the people who have the biggest accounts on social media
Mm,
aren't necessarily as in tune with the patients, because some of the people who don't have as big accounts, all of their time is spent thinking about and working with their patients, and they don't necessarily need the social media in that same way. So everybody's really different, and
that's
we're
right.
talking about an audience, half of whom are probably not on social media at all. So no one here
Well,
really cares about
when
that.
talking about concepts of spirituality, that's one way I drain mine real fast,
I agree with you.
just
That's
personally.
why, most of us, not everyone, but some of the people listening to this, we keep the Sabbath, we keep Shabbat. So we have at least one day a week that is 25 hours free of social media, free of the outside world, phones. And
Lovely.
it is so powerful. And I think everybody should try that. It's the best day of the week, that's for sure.
Lovely, yeah.
So, well, I want to thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it. And this was such great information.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, I'm back here for today's Torah Extra. I don't like to be the one to do it. I really love to bring on other people with their viewpoints and, just hearing from a variety of different people. But like I said, I thought somebody was going to come on and do it, and I totally respect her decision not to do it, and I understand why it was a difficult task for her to do. So I'm on today because there was no way I was waiting another week to find someone else to put this out or asking someone else to do this at the last minute. So what I did, guys, the way I decided to do this was I re-listened to the episode and I wrote down a few of the things that Dr. Jim and I talked about that sort of stood out to me. And then I kind of tried to think or find different ways that we could connect some of these separate topics into Torah concepts. So I hope you guys will enjoy. And again, as always, I love all feedback. So feel free to let me know what you guys think. So I think one of the things that we talked about when it came to cholesterol and, using statin medication, but one of the big overriding principles I know that Dr. Jim said that he would look at is you've got to look at all the different lifestyle factors, within a person. And one of these big pieces, or one of the big pieces, is diet. So I want to just say that the way I've always, and I think I said it in episode number 1, if we think about, we can talk about all the different things that we've talked about before and using nicotine patches and hydrogen water and all of these different things. But the end of the day, if you are not, if you're closet eating Twinkies and ring dings, instead of eating things the way they came out of the earth, you are likely going to have some pieces of your diet that really need to be cleaned up. So the way that I personally, this is not a direct Torah connection, but I'm going to talk about it like this. And that, when Hashem brought Adam and Eve into the garden, he basically said they could eat from all the different, trees and, the vegetables and things like that. And there are people that use that today as a reason why maybe they might want to be vegetarian. But times changed. Things changed in the Garden of Eden as well. And eventually we were actually told about the different meat we could eat. There is huge sections in the Torah talking about what animals are kosher, what, types of fish are kosher, what things we're allowed to eat. And so I believe that if God gave us permission to eat it, we can eat it. However, what God didn't say was pump it full of hormones and antibiotics and fatten it up so that instead of, being a chicken that weighs, I don't know, 3 pounds, it's a chicken that weighs 7 pounds, so you could get more money and grow them quicker and grow them faster. And man was supposed to work the land. Like that was one of our punishments, right? In the Garden of Eden was we had to actually work for our food. So instead of making it easier, if you're eating organic and you're eating things that come out of the ground and you're cooking it at home, you're probably off to a good start. So that's my own assessment of what the Torah says in terms of diet, the types of things that we should be eating. Okay. We talked about the need to move your body. And, this is like a core principle of the Rambam. The Rambam talks about it in many places in Hilchot Deot. It's spoken about in many places. One particular quote I found was in Perek Daled Pasuk. Oh, I wrote in English, 14:15. As long as a person exercises and exerts himself, illness will not come upon him. So I'm not going to keep beating the movement to death. There are many other examples we can find in the Torah, but it is very clear. It is very clear from the Rambam Maimonides, who we use as like a guiding principle of movement being a good thing. So we talked about, one of the things that that you really needed to worry about. It wasn't just whether your cholesterol is high or your LDL is high or your HDL is high. One of the things that Dr. Jim spoke about was he spoke about particle size. And in this situation, the bigger, the better, right? We talked about bowling balls versus marbles. So I kind of tried to decide, well, are there places in the Torah where we see that something that is bigger is better? And I know that like one of, the things I love is that Eretz Yisrael or Israel is described as Eretz Tova Urchava, a good and wide land. And one of the reasons that we needed the Beit HaMikdash to be built, or the Holy Temple to be built, rather than just having the Mishkan, was because the spiritual needs of the nation had grown. So we needed like a larger place to be able to help with the spiritual needs of what was going on at the time. And then one of my favorites is if we think back to when Moshe sent the spies into Eretz Yisrael, think of the way they described the fruit. Like that was something that like I didn't even need to try to find. It was something that came to my mind right away, was the way they came back and they described the fruit. And it was given such a large physical description, really to show the extraordinary abundance and vitality of the land. And so definitely in that case, big was seen to be better. And, a main component of what we talked about, the problem with cholesterol and things, was we talked about, oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is sort of like a destructive fire or an inner corruption within us. And, fire is something really interesting because fire is something that can be used to refine things or destroy things. And the same goes for oxidation, right? Fire can remove impurities. We can use fire to sterilize things. Like I remember when I made the third hole in my ear, I think I was like in 8th grade. And honestly, I could have just asked my father to do it. My dad's a doctor and he pierced my ears. But no, I had to do it myself. And I remember taking a lighter and using that to sterilize the safety pin that I then turned around and used to do my third hole. And now I wear no earrings. But anyways, so I know fire, can be used to sterilize things. And also fire makes food edible. Like that's how we cook food, right? Certain foods when they're raw are not, I don't want to say not as good, but sometimes not even as healthy. Sometimes things need to be heated. And we know that like when we boil water, right, it purifies the water or it sterilizes the water itself. If you're not sure if there's bacteria, it can kill bacteria, things like that at a certain temperature. So fire can be a good thing, but fire can also destroy things, right? If there's no limits on fire, it's going to destroy every single thing in its path. And, if a fire is constant, like what's a constant fire? A constant fire in our bodies is inflammation. I mean, it's got the word flame right in it, right? So fire, oxidative stress, like it's something that can be, you've got to look at the way things can be. Sometimes they can be used for the good. Sometimes they can be used, not for the good. And fire is that same way. And I think a very big theme in what we talked about today was really how different things affect different people. And what is that really? That is bio-individuality. There are no two people in this world that are exactly 100% the same. And the Torah gives us many examples of where this is true. And so I wanted to point out just a couple of them. In the Gemara of Brachot, 58a, just as their faces are different, so are their thoughts. And this is kind of showing us that there are physical difference in every single person, but also even within our minds, people are different. And who doesn't know this, right? Like I always say, like I'm divorced. I don't hide that. But, it takes two to tango. You have two people, you'll have three opinions or three sides to the story. You have his side, her side, and somewhere in the middle, the truth. Because everybody's perception of something is their own reality. So people could see the same thing and they can literally view it completely differently. And that's why I say, even with this podcast, guys, you can agree with me. You cannot agree with me. And it's okay. And I'm willing to discuss anything you want, as long as we're calm, as long as we're rational, as long as we can hear each other. And people do not have to think exactly the same. And that's one of the beautiful things in this world, is that no two people are the same. If we think about the 12 tribes, each one of the tribes had their own personality, had their own brachot, they had their own spiritual temperaments, they had their own job or role that was theirs. Each one of them was different. And, second to lastly, the Rambam talks about people just being born with different spiritual temperaments as well. And, we talk about people who are, hard to anger, right? That's like the best type of person that you can be. But people are born differently, and we have to allow for those differences. So lastly, a very big, people use this all the time when talking about our health. V'nishmartem me'od et nafshotechem, right? The Torah doesn't demand the same lifestyle. Like we are commanded literally to look after ourselves, to look after our souls. And that can be interpreted in many different ways. But the Torah doesn't expect each person to live the exact same lifestyle, because what is good for one is not necessarily what is the best thing for someone else. And that is why it is so important. I don't think anybody should listen to this and go off a statin. And I wasn't really trying to figure out how a statin exactly could fit into Torah. I was more trying to figure out how some of the principles of the overriding concepts of the things that we talked about could fit into Torah. And I think that, what we're talking about is a statin being more a Band-Aid. And sometimes that bandage could cause more problems than it helps. And I think if this is something you've heard that resonates with you, and this is something that you're taking, then it would be a great idea to go speak to your own doctor or a healthcare practitioner. If you're interested in speaking to a functional medicine person, Dr. Jim, or, anyone who's closer to you, wherever you are, I'm happy to help you find that person. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And once again, Shabbat Shalom. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and all of its guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Yakir Abelo for editing this podcast.